I am Ezra, 32 years old, and my brother-in-law spent 7 years treating me like I didn't exist, wiping me out of family history like a smudge on a camera lens, all to secure a multimillion-dollar inheritance. But before I tell you about the moment his entire world crumbled in a lawyer's office, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. It started, as it always did, with the roar of an engine. The sound wasn't just loud. It was aggressive. It was a mechanical scream that announced Ryan's arrival before you could even see the car. I was standing in the foyer of my in-laws' house, holding a tray of deviled eggs I'd just finished garnishing, when the front door swung open. My mother-in-law, Marie, practically sprinted past me, nearly knocking the tray out of my hands. "He's here! He's here!" she chirped, her face flushed with the kind of excitement usually reserved for royalty or the second coming. Outside, a cherry-red Ferrari sat in the driveway, its engine ticking as it cooled in the crisp December air. It looked like a spaceship parked in front of a colonial suburban home. And stepping out of it was Ryan, the golden child, the prodigal son, and the man who had made it his personal mission to ensure I knew exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Nowhere. He tossed the keys to the valet, a kid he'd actually hired just for the evening to park cars in his own parents' driveway, and strode up the steps. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my work van, and he had that smile plastered on his face. You know, the one. It didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile that said, "I own this room and everyone in it is renting space." "Merry Christmas, family," Ryan boomed, stepping into the warmth of the hall. My wife, Chloe, squeezed my hand. I could feel the tension in her fingers. "Just ignore him," she whispered, though her voice wavered. "Please, Ezra. For Mom and Dad." "I always do," I muttered back. Ryan hugged his parents, lifting his mother off her feet. He hugged the cousins. He shook hands with the neighbors who had been invited. Then he turned toward us. His eyes slid over Chloe, lighting up, and he pulled her into a hug. "Sis, you look great. Finally ditching those outlet mall clothes." "Huh," he laughed, slapping her on the back. Then his gaze shifted to me. The smile vanished. It wasn't that he looked angry. It was worse. He looked through me. He looked at the space I occupied as if it were empty air. He didn't nod. He didn't blink. He just turned his back and shouted, "Who's ready for the real gifts?" That was the routine. For 7 years since I married Chloe, I had been the ghost at the feast. We moved into the living room, where the tree was practically buried under a mountain of wrapping paper. This was Ryan's stage. Every year, he turned Christmas into a showcase of his financial dominance. He didn't just give gifts, he deployed them. "For Mom and Dad," Ryan announced, handing over a sleek, heavy envelope. Marie tore it open and gasped, covering her mouth. "Tickets? To the Amalfi Coast?" "Oh, Ryan. First class, Mom. 5-star hotels only. You guys deserve a break," Ryan said, soaking up the applause. Next came Chloe. He handed her a bright orange box. "Hermes." I saw Chloe's eyes widen. She pulled out a scarf that felt like spun silk. "It's beautiful, Ryan. Thank you." He winked. "Gotta keep my little sister stylish." Then he started handing out boxes to the cousins, the aunts, even the housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, got a brand new iPad. The room was buzzing with the sound of tearing paper and gasps of delight. The pile of gifts under the tree shrank until there was nothing left. Except for me. I sat there, a fixed smile on my face, hands clasped on my lap. The room went quiet. It was that awkward, heavy silence where everyone realizes something is wrong but is too polite to say it. Marie cleared her throat. "Oh, Ryan, did you leave Ezra's gift in the car?" Ryan looked up from his glass of scotch, feigning surprise. He snapped his fingers. "Ah, shoot. You know what? I totally blanked." He looked at me then, really looked at me with a glint of malice in his eyes. "I was gonna get you a new tool belt or something for your little projects. But then I thought Ezra's a simple guy, right? He doesn't care about material things. So, I made a donation in your name instead." "Oh, that's lovely," Marie said quickly. desperate to smooth over the tension. What charity? Ryan smirked. The Help Ryan Buy a New Ferrari Fund. It's a very worthy cause. A few cousins chuckled nervously. Ryan laughed louder, slapping his knee. I'm kidding. Seriously though, I ran out of time, Ezra. You understand. Business has been insane. Merger talks, you know how it is. I understand, I said, my voice steady. The Ferrari looks nice, Ryan. Yeah, well, he swirled his drink. It takes a certain kind of man to handle a machine like that. Maybe one day I'll let you sit in it. While it's parked. The room erupted in forced laughter again. I felt the heat rising in my neck, but I kept my face neutral. This was the game. If I got angry, I was the jealous, ungrateful brother-in-law. If I stayed silent, I was the doormat. But there was one person in the room who wasn't laughing. In the corner, sitting in her high-backed velvet armchair, was Grandma Dorothy. She was 93 years old, frail as a dried leaf, wrapped in a knitted shawl. Most of the family treated her like furniture, there to be dusted off for photos and then ignored. They thought her mind was going, that she was just a sweet, confused old lady. But as Ryan made his joke about the donation, I looked over at Dorothy. She wasn't looking at the Ferrari keys Ryan was twirling. She wasn't looking at the pile of expensive gifts. Her steel gray eyes were locked right on me, and she wasn't smiling. She gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was a tiny gesture, but it felt heavy. Felt like an anchor. Later that night, as the party wound down, I was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Alvarez load the dishwasher. Something Ryan would never deign to do. Dorothy shuffled in, leaning heavily on her cane. Ezra, she rasped. Hey, Grandma D, can I get you some tea? I asked, drying my hands. She waved the offer away. That car out there, she said, gesturing toward the driveway with a shaky hand. It's loud. It's a Ferrari, Grandma. It's supposed to be loud. It's loud, she repeated. Because it's empty inside. Just noise. She shuffled closer, her eyes sharp. You endure a lot, boy. It's fine, I said, forcing a smile. Ryan is just being Ryan. People show you who they are, she whispered. You just have to be patient enough to watch them finish the performance. She patted my arm, her hand light as a feather, and walked away. I didn't know it then, but she had already started the clock. Ryan thought he was building an empire, brick by brick, gift by gift. He didn't realize that the foundation he was standing on was being inspected by the one person he couldn't charm. I went back out to the living room. Ryan was holding court, talking about stocks and crypto, his voice booming. You have to be ruthless, he was telling my father-in-law, George. The world doesn't reward kindness. It rewards power. It rewards taking what's yours. George nodded enthusiastically. That's my boy. A shark. You're a shark, Ryan. I looked at Chloe. She looked tired. She caught my eye and mouthed, I'm sorry. I signaled that it was time to go. As we walked to our car, a reliable 10-year-old sedan that had seen better days, Ryan came out to the porch to smoke a cigar. Safe drive, Ezra, he called out, smoke curling around his head like a halo. Try not to break down on the highway. I don't have AAA on my plan for you. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. One day, I whispered to myself, one day, this stops. But I had no idea that the mechanism for his destruction was already in motion. And I definitely didn't know that the Help Ryan Buy a Ferrari Fund was about to be audited in the most brutal way possible. If you've ever felt small in a room full of big egos, hit that like button. Because we're just getting started, and the fall from the top is a long, hard drop. To understand why that Christmas stung so much, you have to understand the 7 years of cuts and bruises that led up to it. It wasn't just one bad night. It was a systematic campaign to erase me. The worst memory, the one that still woke me up at night with a cold sweat of humiliation, was our wedding day. Chloe and I paid for most of the wedding ourselves. We wanted something small, intimate, a garden ceremony. But Marie and George insisted on upgrading it to match the family status. They invited business associates I'd never met. They changed the menu, but I let it slide because I wanted peace. Then came the speeches. I had just finished my toast to Chloe, telling her how she was the light of my life. I'm an antique restorer. I spend my days taking things that are broken, forgotten, and covered in grime, and I bring them back to life. I told the room that love was like that. It required patience, care, and a gentle hand. People clapped. It was warm. It was nice. Then Ryan grabbed the microphone. He was already 3 drinks deep. He swayed a little, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. Great speech, Ezra. Really quaint, he said into the mic. The feedback whined. But let's talk about reality for a second. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. He held it up like a trophy. Family, Ryan announced, his voice echoing off the walls. Family is about blood. It's about taking care of your own. Now, I know Ezra here is what do you call it? A fixer-upper. Laughter rippled through the room. My stomach dropped. He fixes old chairs, which is cute, Ryan continued. But my sister deserves the world. So, inside this envelope is a check for $5,000. The crowd oohed and ahed. But, Ryan held up a finger. I want to be clear. This is for Chloe. This is for my sister. This is a safety net. Because let's be honest, in this economy, fixing chairs isn't exactly going to buy a summer home. He walked over to the head table, bypassed me completely, and slapped the envelope down in front of Chloe. Don't spend it on glue, Ezra, he said into the mic, loud enough for the people in the back to hear. The room went silent. My parents, sitting at a table in the back, looked down at their plates. I felt stripped naked. It wasn't a gift. It was a demarcation line. He was drawing a circle around his family and leaving me on the outside. Chloe tried to refuse it later, but Marie insisted. He's just being protective, honey. That's just Ryan's way. He has a big personality. That phrase, big personality, became the shield they used to deflect every insult he hurled my way. It happened on every family vacation. 2 years ago, the family rented a massive lake house in Tahoe. It had 8 bedrooms. There were 10 of us. Ryan, of course, took the master suite with the jacuzzi and the balcony. I need the space to decompress, he argued. My job is high stress. Ezra, you just sandwood all day. You're basically meditating. Marie and George took the second suite. The cousins took the guest rooms. When we arrived, tired from a 6-hour drive, I asked where our room was. Ryan pointed to the den downstairs. There's a pull-out couch in there. It's actually really comfortable. Plus, you're near the kitchen, so you can get snacks. There are 2 other empty bedrooms upstairs, I pointed out. Oh, those are for storage, Ryan said breezily. I brought my golf clubs, my ski gear. I didn't want to clutter the master. You guys don't mind, right? You're young. It's like camping. For a week, my wife and I slept on a lumpy mattress with a metal bar digging into our backs, while Ryan's golf clubs slept in a queen-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets. Every morning, I'd come up for coffee, stiff and sore, and Ryan would be there, fresh and rested, scrolling through his phone. Sleep well, camper? He'd ask, not looking up. Like a baby, I'd lie. Good. Hey, since you're up, the deck needs sweeping. Pine needles everywhere. You're good with your hands, right? He treated me not like a brother, but like a hired hand that he didn't even have to pay. And the worst part was the way he belittled my work. To Ryan, value was only measured in zeros in a bank account. He was a consultant. I still didn't really know what he did, other than talk loudly on the phone and move money from one place to another. One evening, during that same trip, we were all sitting around the fire pit. I was talking to an uncle about a 19th century grandfather clock I was restoring. I was passionate about it, the gears, the history, the craftsmanship. It's about preserving time, I explained. Making sure something that has lasted 100 years lasts another 100. Ryan yawned, a loud, theatrical sound. Boring, he sang out. Excuse me, I said. It's trash, Ezra, Ryan said, poking the fire with a stick. It's old junk. You're a glorified garbage man. You pick up things people throw away, polish them, and sell them to hipsters. That's not a career. That's a hobby for retired men. It's history, I defended, my voice tight. It's art. Art is a diversified portfolio, Ryan countered. Art is a passive income stream. You're trading hours for dollars, Ezra. Rookie mistake. That's why you'll always be. He gestured vaguely at me. You. Chloe stood up then. That's enough, Ryan. I'm just trying to help him. Ryan threw his hands up. I'm trying to teach him how the real world works. Grandma Dorothy has money, right? You think she got that by sanding chairs? No. Grandpa built a manufacturing empire. He crushed his competition. That's the blood in our veins. I'm just wondering if Ezra has any iron in his. That was the dynamic. A constant, grinding erosion of my dignity. But Ryan made a mistake. He assumed that because I was quiet, I was stupid. He assumed that because I worked with my hands, I couldn't understand the complexities of finance or law. And most of all, he assumed that because Grandma Dorothy was old, she was blind. He didn't know that while he was busy, storing his golf clubs, in the guest room, I was the one sitting on the porch with Dorothy, fixing the clasp on her favorite locket. He didn't know that while he was bragging about his portfolio, I was listening to Dorothy talk about the loneliness of being the matriarch. They wait for me to die, Ezra. She had told me on that trip, staring out at the lake. I can feel it. They look at me and they see a countdown clock. Not everyone, I had said gently. No, she turned to me. Not everyone, but the loud ones. They are the hungriest. These memories swirled in my head as we drove away from the Christmas party. The wedding, the pull-out couch, the insults. I hate him, Chloe whispered in the car, breaking the silence. Tears were streaming down her face. I hate him so much, Ezra. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. But things have to change. They won't, she sobbed. Mom and Dad worship him. He's the golden boy. He can do no wrong. Everyone makes a mistake eventually, I said, thinking of the way Ryan looked when he talked about money. It was a hunger, and hungry people make sloppy choices. I didn't know how right I was. The storm wasn't just coming. It was already overhead, and the lightning was about to strike in the form of a secret Santa exchange that would tear the family apart forever. The following year, the tension didn't dissipate. It calcified. It became a hard, ugly thing sitting in the center of the family. And then came the secret Santa incident. It was supposed to be fun. A limit of $100. Draw names from a hat. Keep it simple. We gathered at Marie and George's house again. Ryan was there, of course, pacing the living room, talking loudly into a Bluetooth earpiece about liquidating assets and leveraging positions. He looked thinner, more wired than usual. His eyes were darting around the room, manic energy radiating off him. When it came time to exchange gifts, the cruelty was breathtaking in its precision. Ryan had drawn his father's name. The limit was $100. Ryan handed George a box that clearly contained a Rolex. Rules are for poor people, Dad. Ryan laughed as George stared at the gold watch in awe. I wanted you to have the best. That's a Submariner. Vintage. Ryan, you shouldn't have. George stammered, clearly delighted but feigning protest. Nonsense. Nothing is too good for the man who raised me. Then it was my turn. The name on the tag of the gift handed to me was written in Ryan's sprawling, arrogant handwriting. To Ezra. He had drawn my name. I held the package. It was light, flimsy. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a book. Not a new book. A used paperback copy of Economics for Dummies. The cover was torn, and there was a coffee stain on the front. I found it in a thrift store, Ryan announced, grinning like a shark. Since you love old, broken things so much. Plus, I figured you could use a crash course on how money actually works. Maybe help you get off that pull-out couch next vacation. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Marie looked uncomfortable. It's thoughtful, I said, placing the book on the table. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a drumbeat of pure rage. It cost me $1, Ryan bragged. That's what I call ROI. Return on investment, Ezra. Look it up. It's in chapter 1. But he wasn't done. The cruelty wasn't just directed at me anymore. It was leaking out, poisoning everything. My cousin's son, Timmy, was 5 years old. A sweet kid. He had been watching the exchange with big eyes. He tugged on Ryan's expensive suit jacket. Uncle Ryan? Timmy asked. Why didn't Uncle Ezra get a toy? Or a watch? Ryan looked down at the child. He didn't smile. He crouched down, bringing his face level with the boys. Listen to me, Timmy, Ryan said, his voice dropping to a chilly whisper that carried across the room. In life, there are winners and there are losers. Winners get watches. Losers get books about how to be winners. Uncle Ezra, he's still learning. Sometimes people don't get gifts because they don't deserve them. They haven't earned their place at the table. Timmy's lip wobbled. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He looked at me, confused and sad. That was it. That was the moment. Insult me all you want, but don't poison a child. I stood up. That's enough, Ryan. Sit down, Ezra, Ryan snapped, standing up to his full height. I'm teaching the boy a life lesson, something you wouldn't know anything about. I opened my mouth to retaliate, to finally scream the 7 years of anger out of my lungs. But a sudden crash from the kitchen interrupted us. Marie had dropped a platter. The distraction broke the standoff. Everyone rushed to help her. Ryan rolled his eyes and pulled out his phone, walking away. I needed air. I needed to get away from him before I did something that would land me in jail. I walked down the hallway toward the guest bathroom at the back of the house. As I approached the door, I heard a voice. It was Ryan. He was inside the bathroom, and he was shouting in a hushed, desperate whisper. I stopped. I knew I shouldn't eavesdrop, but my feet wouldn't move. I can't pay it yet, Ryan was hissing. I told you the liquidity is tied up. No, don't call the house. Don't you dare call Chloe or my parents. Look, the old lady is 94. 94. She can't last forever. The doctor said she's frail. My blood ran cold. It's a sure thing, Ryan continued, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. She has millions sitting there. Once the inheritance clears, I'll pay the principal and the VIG. All of it. Just give me a few more months. I'll get the money. The Porsche is a lease. Okay? I can't sell it. I don't own it. Just hold off. I stepped back, my breath caught in my throat. The Ferrari, the Rolex, the first-class tickets. It was all a lie. Ryan wasn't a successful consultant. He was broke. He was drowning in debt, likely from gambling or bad investments, and he was living entirely on credit, banking on one horrifying contingency. Grandma Dorothy's death. He had spent her money before she was even in the ground. I backed away silently, my mind racing. This wasn't just about him being a jerk anymore. This was dangerous. A man that desperate. A man who owed money to people he was terrified of. What would he do to speed up his payday? I returned to the party, my face pale. I looked at Ryan across the room. He had composed himself. He was laughing with his father, drinking champagne, acting the part of the billionaire. But now I saw the sweat on his upper lip. I saw the way his hand shook slightly when he lifted the glass. He was a cornered animal. And then I looked at Dorothy. She was sitting in her chair, eyes closed, looking frail, vulnerable. I realized then that I couldn't just leave. I couldn't just cut ties and run. I had to protect her, because Ryan was banking on her death, and I had a sickening feeling he was getting impatient waiting for nature to take its course. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the passive observer anymore. I was going to enter the game. But I wasn't going to play by Ryan's rules. I was going to play by Dorothy's. After the Secret Santa revelation, the atmosphere shifted. To everyone else, life went on as usual. But for me, every interaction with Ryan felt like watching a bomb countdown. I started visiting Dorothy more often. Not at family gatherings, but in the quiet of the week. She lived in a beautiful, sprawling Victorian estate that had been in the family for 3 generations. It was filled with history. Oak paneling, stained glass windows, and the scent of lavender and old paper. It was the kind of house I dreamed of restoring, but Ryan saw it only as a tear-down lot. I'd go over on Tuesday afternoons. I told Chloe I was scouting for antiques in the area, which was technically true. Dorothy and I would sit in the sunroom. She drank Earl Grey. I drank black coffee. "You look tired, Ezra," she said one afternoon, setting her cup down on the saucer with a delicate clink. "Just work, Grandma D." I lied. "Busy season." "You're a terrible liar," she smiled. It was a sharp, knowing smile. "It's Ryan, isn't it?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to tell her about the phone call I heard in the bathroom, about the debt, about how he was waiting for her to die. But how do you tell a 94-year-old woman that her favorite grandson is a vulture circling her bed? "He's just stressed," I said carefully. "He's hollow," Dorothy corrected. She looked out the window at the overgrown rose garden. "He was here yesterday. Did you know that? Ryan was here? With a man. An architect, I think." Dorothy's eyes narrowed. They didn't think I could hear them. They were measuring the walls. Ryan was talking about knocking down the library to make a home gym. He was arguing about whether to put the swimming pool over my rose garden. I felt a surge of nausea. "He measured your house? While you were sitting in it?" "He looked right past me," she said softly, "like I was already a ghost. He asked me if I was comfortable, and then turned around and asked the architect how much it would cost to strip the woodwork." She gripped her cane, her knuckles turning white. "I am not dead yet, Ezra, and I am not stupid." "I know you're not," I said, leaning forward. "You're the smartest person in this family. Then why do they treat me like a bank vault with a slow lock?" Her voice cracked, just for a second, revealing the deep hurt beneath the steel exterior. It broke my heart. This woman had built a legacy, raised a family, and now, in her twilight years, she was being measured for a coffin by the people who should have loved her. "I need a favor," she said suddenly, her demeanor hardening. "Anything. Take me to see Sterling. Tomorrow. Don't tell anyone, especially not Marie, and absolutely not Ryan." Sterling was her lawyer, the family attorney. "Of course," I said. "I'll pick you up at 10. The next morning, I helped Dorothy into my beat-up work van. It wasn't a Ferrari. The suspension squeaked, and it smelled like sawdust and varnish. "This is better," she said, settling into the passenger seat. "It smells like hard work. Ryan's car smells like fear and cologne." We drove to the city in comfortable silence. When we arrived at the law firm, the receptionist looked surprised to see Dorothy walking in on my arm. Not Ryan's. Mr. Sterling, a man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my house, greeted us warmly. He looked at me with suspicion, assuming I was another grandkid looking for a payout. "Ezra is staying," Dorothy announced, sensing the lawyer's hesitation. "He is my witness." We sat in that office for 2 hours. I didn't say a word. I just listened as Dorothy dismantled the future Ryan had built in his head. She spoke with clarity and precision. She talked about the Secret Santa incident. She talked about the measurements of her house. She talked about the lack of visits unless money was involved. "I want to change it, Arthur," she said firmly. "All of it." Sterling nodded, scribbling furiously. "You understand the implications, Dorothy? This will cause significant friction." "Let there be friction," she said, her eyes flashing fire. "I want to leave my legacy to the people who actually care about the soil, not just the fruit." As we left the office, Dorothy seemed lighter. The weight of the inevitable seemed to have lifted off her shoulders. "Thank you, Ezra," she said as I buckled her seatbelt. "You don't have to thank me." She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You never asked, did you? In 7 years, you never once asked me about the will. You never asked for a loan. You never asked for a job." "I don't want your money, Grandma. I just want you to be treated with respect." She patted my cheek. "I know. That's why you're dangerous to them. You can't be bought." We drove back to her estate. As I walked her to the door, I saw a black SUV parked down the street. It looked out of place. I had a bad feeling, a prickle on the back of my neck. "Be careful, Grandma," I whispered. "I'm always careful," she said. "But Ezra? If anything happens, check the velvet lining of the jewelry box. The blue one." "What? Why?" "Just promise me." "I promise." 2 weeks later, the call came. It was 3 a.m. The phone rang, shattering the silence of our bedroom. Chloe answered it, and I heard her scream. Dorothy was gone, and the storm finally broke. The days between Dorothy's death and the funeral were a blur of black clothes and hushed whispers. But for Ryan, it was barely concealed euphoria. He tried to look sad. He wore dark sunglasses and dabbed at his dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. But I saw him in the hallway of the funeral home, scrolling through real estate listings on his phone. I heard him on the call to his creditors. "It's done. She's gone. Funds will be released in a week. Start the paperwork on the loan payoff." He was practically vibrating with anticipation. He had already listed his own house for sale, confident that he would be moving into the Victorian estate within the month. The funeral was lavish. Ryan insisted on the most expensive casket, the biggest flower arrangements. "Only the best for Grandma," he proclaimed loudly to the weeping relatives. It was grotesque. He was spending her money to bury her, treating her final farewell like a networking event. Then came the reading of the will. It was held in the grand conference room of Sterling's law firm. A long mahogany table stretched down the center of the room. The air smelled of old leather and greed. Ryan arrived in a Rolls-Royce Phantom. I knew for a fact he had rented it that morning. I saw the rental agreement sticking out of his briefcase when he opened it to check his hair. He walked in like a conquering king, holding his wife's hand, followed by his parents. Chloe and I sat at the far end of the table. I held her hand. She was genuinely grieving, her eyes red and swollen. Ryan looked at his watch, tapping his foot impatiently. "Let's get this show on the road, Arthur," Ryan called out to Mr. Sterling. "We all know the drill. Sad day. Life goes on. Let's sign the papers." Mr. Sterling sat at the head of the table. He didn't look at Ryan. He opened a thick leather folder. He adjusted his glasses. "Dorothy explicitly requested that this reading be recorded," Sterling said, nodding to a camera set up in the corner. "And she requested that everyone be present." "We're all here," Ryan gestured. "The family, and Ezra." He said my name like it was a clerical error. "Very well," Sterling began. "I, Dorothy and Miller, being of sound mind and body." He went through the small bequests first. A few $1,000s to the gardener, the antique china to a cousin in Ohio. Ryan rolled his eyes, checking his phone. Then the heavy hitters. "To my son, George, and his wife, Marie." Sterling read, "I leave the vacation cabin in Aspen." Marie gasped, "Oh, the cabin. It's lovely." Ryan smirked. "Nice. Good asset. Keep it in the family." "To my granddaughter, Chloe," Sterling continued. Ryan leaned forward. Chloe squeezed my hand. "I leave the sum of $50,000. Ryan let out a short, bark-like laugh. 50 grand? That's it? Ouch. Sorry, sis. Guess she didn't like the new haircut. Chloe didn't care. She nodded, tears falling. "I miss her," she whispered. "And now," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, "to the bulk of the estate." Ryan straightened his tie. He sat up straighter. This was it. The moment he had mortgaged his life for. "My estate includes the Victorian manor, the investment portfolio valued at approximately $5.2 million, the vintage car collection, and the jewelry collection." Ryan was practically salivating. He looked at his wife and winked. "I leave all of the aforementioned assets." Sterling paused. The silence stretched so tight I thought it would snap. "To Ezra." The room stopped. Time stopped. Ryan froze. His smile stayed plastered on his face for a second, like a mask that hadn't received the memo that the party was over. "Excuse me," Ryan whispered. I leave the entire estate to my grandson-in-law Ezra, Sterling repeated clearly. Ryan stood up so fast his chair flew back and hit the wall with a deafening crack. That's a joke, Ryan sputtered. That's a typo. Arthur, stop messing around. Read the real will. This is the real will, Ryan, Sterling said calmly. Updated and signed 3 weeks ago. You're lying, Ryan screamed, slamming his fist onto the table. He manipulated her. Look at him. He pointed a shaking finger at me. He's a nobody. He fixes garbage. I am her grandson. I am the blood heir. Sit down, Mr. Miller, Sterling warned. I will not sit down. This is fraud. Undue influence. Ryan's face was turning a terrifying shade of purple. Veins bulged in his neck. She was senile. She didn't know what she was doing. Ezra brainwashed her. She was perfectly lucid. Sterling countered, his voice icy. And what do I get? Ryan shrieked. What about me? The golden child? What did she leave me? Sterling looked down at the paper. He cleared his throat. To my grandson, Ryan, he read. I leave my collection of refrigerator magnets. Specifically, the ones from all the states you never visited me in. Sterling reached under the table and pulled out a small, battered shoebox. He slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Ryan. The room was deadly silent. Ryan stared at the box. He looked like he was having a stroke. He grabbed the box and hurled it across the room. Magnets scattered everywhere. Little plastic souvenirs clattering against the expensive wood paneling. I'll kill you. Ryan lunged across the table toward me. Security guards. I hadn't even noticed them standing by the door. Stepped forward instantly, blocking him. Ryan was thrashing, screaming obscenities. You stole my life. I have debts. You can't do this. Ryan, stop. Marie cried out, terrified. There is one more thing, Sterling shouted over the noise. He picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. Dorothy anticipated this reaction. She left a video. Ryan stopped struggling. He stared at the black screen. The screen flickered to life. And there was Dorothy. She was sitting in her sunroom, wearing her favorite blue dress. She looked straight into the camera. She looked strong. Hello, family. Dorothy's voice filled the room. Ryan went pale. If you are watching this video, Dorothy said, then Ryan is currently making a scene. He is probably shouting about fraud. He is probably claiming I was crazy. She paused, leaning into the lens. I am not crazy, Ryan, but I am observant. And I know what you did. The blood drained from Ryan's face so completely he looked like a corpse. I know about your debts, Dorothy said. I know about the gambling. I know you mortgaged your future on my grave. Ryan began to shake. Turn it off, he whispered. Turn it off. But that's not why I cut you out, Dorothy continued, her voice hardening into steel. I cut you out because of the conversation you had with me last month. Do you remember? When you brought me my tea, the room went so quiet you could hear a pin drop. You suggested, Dorothy said, enunciating every word, that I should stop taking my heart medication. You said, Grandma, maybe the pills are making you tired. Maybe you should let nature take its course. It would be peaceful. Gasps erupted around the table. Marie covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Chloe let out a sob. You tried to kill me, Ryan, Dorothy said. Not with a knife, but with a whisper. You wanted me dead so you could pay for your Ferrari. And that is why Ezra gets everything. Because while you were counting the days until I died, he was the only one making my days worth living. The screen went black. Ryan stood there, swaying. He looked at his parents. Marie was looking at him with a mixture of horror and disgust I had never seen before. George looked like he had been punched in the gut. Mom, Ryan croaked. She misunderstood. I was just worried about side effects. Get out, Marie whispered. Mom, please, I need the money. I owe. Get out, George roared, slamming his hand on the table. Ryan looked around the room. He looked at me. There was no arrogance left. No golden child. Just a broke, desperate man who had played a high-stakes game and lost everything. He grabbed his briefcase and ran out of the room. We heard the heavy door slam shut. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. The aftermath of the reading was immediate and brutal. Ryan didn't just lose the inheritance. He lost the illusion. Within hours, the news spread through the family grapevine. The golden child had fallen. I stayed behind in Sterling's office after everyone else had left. I was still in shock. $5 million. The estate. It didn't feel real. I looked at my hands. Calloused, stained with varnish residue. These were hands that fixed chairs. They weren't hands that held millions. "She left this for you?" Sterling said, handing me a thick envelope. "For your eyes only." I opened it. It was a letter, handwritten in Dorothy's elegant, shaky script. "My dearest Ezra, I know you are panicked right now. You are wondering why I gave you this burden. Because that is what money is. A burden. But it is also a tool. I gave it to you because you are a restorer. You look at broken things and see their value. You look at the past and see lessons, not just trash. You will know what to do with this legacy. You won't spend it on Ferraris. You will build something. P.S. Ryan's Porsche is a lease. The dealer called the house looking for him last week. And his business hasn't filed a tax return in 3 years. He is a house of cards, Ezra. Don't let him fall on you." I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. I felt a strange sense of calm. The money wasn't a prize. It was a responsibility. Dorothy trusted me to be the custodian of the family's honor, now that Ryan had pawned it. I walked out to the parking lot. Chloe was waiting for me by our old sedan. She looked at me, uncertain. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the medication?" "The video didn't lie, Chloe." She collapsed into my arms, weeping. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was that bad." "I know." I held her tight. "It's over now." But for Ryan, the nightmare was just beginning. The twist about his finances wasn't just a rumor. It was a landslide. 2 days later, the repo men came for the Ferrari. It happened at his parents' house, where he was hiding out. The neighbors watched as the red car was winched onto a truck. It was a humiliating spectacle. Then came the foreclosure notice on his own house. It turned out he had taken out 3 mortgages against it to fund his lifestyle and pay off gambling debts. But the final nail in the coffin came from his wife, Jessica. I ran into her a week later at the grocery store. She looked tired, but relieved. "I filed for divorce," she told me in the produce aisle. I found his second phone, the one he used to talk to the loan sharks. He wasn't just waiting for Dorothy to die, Ezra. He had taken out a life insurance policy on me too. A chill went down my spine. Dorothy had saved more than just her estate. She might have saved lives. "I gave everything to the police," Jessica said. "The fraud, the threats. He's going to be tied up in court for years." Ryan's fall was absolute. He went from the golden child to a pariah. His parents, Marie and George, were shattered. They had enabled him for decades, blinded by his charm, and now they had to live with the knowledge that they had raised a monster. They came to our house a month later. It was awkward. We sat in the living room, the same room where I used to sleep on the pull-out couch when they visited, though now it was my house, bought and paid for with my own hard work, even before the inheritance came through. "We owe you an apology, Ezra," George said, his voice gruff. He couldn't meet my eyes. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "But you owe Dorothy an apology. You let him treat her like a nuisance." Marie dabbed her eyes. "We didn't see it. We wanted him to be successful so badly." "Success isn't about money," I said, echoing Dorothy's words. "It's about character. And you let him believe that character was something you could buy." They left, looking older and smaller. As for the inheritance, I didn't go out and buy a sports car. I didn't buy a yacht. I took a portion of the money and set up a trust for Timmy, my nephew, the one Ryan had told didn't deserve a gift. I made sure his college would be paid for so he'd never have to feel less than because of money. And then I did what I do best. I started restoring the Victorian estate. I hired a crew, but I did a lot of the work myself. I stripped the paint off the woodwork, revealing the beautiful oak underneath. I fixed the stained glass. I brought the garden back to life. One afternoon, while I was clearing out the attic, I found the blue jewelry box Dorothy had mentioned. I opened it. Inside, tucked into the velvet lining, was a small note. For the day you finally feel like you belong. Under the note was a key. It was an old, rusty iron key. I didn't know what it opened yet, but as I held it in my hand, standing in the house that was now mine, I realized I had already found the treasure. The treasure wasn't the money. It was the vindication. It was the knowledge that kindness, no matter how quiet, is eventually heard. And that arrogance, no matter how loud, eventually runs out of breath. 6 months. That's how long it takes for a life to completely invert itself. If you had told me a year ago that I would be waking up in the master suite of the Victorian estate, watching the sunrise filter through the stained glass window I had just restored, I would have told you to stop dreaming. But here I was. The silence of the house wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. It was the sound of a home that was finally breathing again. I wasn't living here as a conqueror, though. I was living here as a caretaker. Every morning I didn't put on a suit. I put on my work boots and my canvas overalls. The estate had been neglected for years, not structurally but spiritually. Ryan had let the gardens overgrow because he didn't want to pay a premium landscaper. He had let the paint peel on the gazebo because he was too busy leasing sports cars to notice the rot setting in. My days were filled with the smell of sawdust and beeswax. I hired a small crew, local guys, honest tradesmen who respected the history of the place, and together we were peeling back the layers of neglect. But while my world was being rebuilt, the world outside the gates was dealing with the rubble of Ryan's collapse. The fallout was catastrophic. It wasn't just a simple bankruptcy. It was a total demolition of his character. The investigation into elder abuse didn't result in jail time. There wasn't enough concrete physical evidence to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt regarding the medication, but the court of public opinion had handed down a life sentence. The local paper ran the story. The community knew. Ryan went from being the guy everyone wanted to know to the guy people crossed the street to avoid. His wife, Jessica, was ruthless in the divorce proceedings, and rightfully so. She took what little was left of his legitimate assets, which wasn't much. The last I heard, Ryan was living in a studio apartment above a garage on the bad side of town, his credit score destroyed, his reputation in tatters. The most painful part, however, was dealing with Marie and George. They came to visit on a Tuesday afternoon. I saw their car pull up the long gravel driveway, a modest sedan now, not the luxury SUV they used to parade around in. They walked up the steps slowly. They looked 10 years older than they had at the funeral. I met them at the door, wiping varnish from my hands with a rag. "Ezra," George said, nodding stiffly. He looked at the floor. "The house. It looks good. You cleaned up the ivy." "It was choking the brickwork," I said calmly. "Come in." We sat in the parlor. This was the room where Ryan used to hold court, swirling his scotch and making jokes about my income. Now the room was bright, filled with restored furniture and fresh flowers. Marie wouldn't make eye contact. She fidgeted with her purse strap. "We saw him," Marie whispered eventually. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Who?" I asked, though I knew. "Ryan," she said, a tear tracing a line through her heavy makeup. "He's working at the distribution center. The night shift, loading trucks. Ezra, he looks terrible. He's lost 30 pounds. He has blisters on his hands." I stayed silent. I poured them tea Earl Grey just like Dorothy used to drink. "He's family," George said, his voice gaining a little strength. "We can't just leave him like that. He's our son." "I know he is," I said. "He needs help, Ezra," George continued, leaning forward. "Legal fees, the divorce settlement. He needs a fresh start. Just a small loan. A bridge. You have all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. Dorothy would have wanted forgiveness. She was a Christian woman. I set my teacup down slowly. The anger flared up, hot and sharp, but I tamped it down. Dorothy was a woman of principle, George, I said. Do you know what she told me in the car on the way to the lawyer's office? She told me that money without character is like a loaded gun in the hands of a child. Ryan pulled the trigger. Now he has to deal with the wound. He's suffering, Marie cried out. He's your brother-in-law. He is the man who looked a 5-year-old boy in the face and told him he didn't deserve a Christmas gift because he was a loser, I said, my voice steady but hard as granite. He is the man who measured this room for a gym while his grandmother sat right there, breathing, terrified that he was trying to erase her. He made mistakes, George shouted. He didn't make mistakes, George. He made choices. Repeated, calculated choices. I stood up. I will not give him money. I will not give him a bridge back to the life that destroyed him. If I give him money now, he learns nothing. He just learns that he can break everything and someone else will buy the glue. Marie began to sob into her hands. It was a heartbreaking sound. The sound of a mother realizing she couldn't protect her child from himself. I walked over to the mantel. There was a photo album there, one I had found in the attic. I picked it up and brought it to them. I won't give him a check, I said, placing the album on the table in front of them. But you can give him this. George looked at it, confused. An album? It's pictures of him, I said, from when he was 10, before the fancy cars, before the arrogance. Pictures of him fishing with Dorothy. Pictures of him building a treehouse. Remind him of who he was before he decided the world owed him a living. That's the only asset he has left that's worth anything. George stared at the album. His hand trembled as he touched the cover. He realized then that I wasn't being cruel. I was offering the only thing that could actually save Ryan. The truth. They left without the money. I watched them drive away, the dust settling behind their car. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But as I turned back to the house, I felt a strange sense of alignment. I hadn't acted out of spite. I had acted out of respect for the legacy Dorothy left me. I went back to work. I had a library to finish. That evening, Chloe came home from her new job. She had quit the high-pressure marketing gig she hated and started working for a nonprofit that helped inner-city kids access art programs. She looked lighter, younger. How did it go? She asked, seeing the 2 teacups still on the table. It was hard, I admitted, but necessary. Did they ask? They asked. And you refused? I did. She walked over and hugged me, burying her face in my chest. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being the strong one. If you had given in, he would have dragged us all back down. We stood there in the quiet house, the shadows lengthening across the floor. By the way, Chloe pulled back, her eyes shining with curiosity. Did you ever figure out what that key opens? The rusty one from the jewelry box. I froze. In the chaos of the renovations and the family drama, I had almost forgotten about it. The key I found in part 6. The rusty iron key with the note. For the day you finally feel like you belong. No, I said, patting my pocket where I had kept it safe all these months. I haven't. Maybe it's time, she smiled. I think you belong now. She was right. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I wasn't the fixer-upper. I was the master of the house. I took the key out. It was heavy, cold iron. It didn't look like a key to a safe or a jewelry box. It looked older, rudimentary. It looks like a padlock key, I mused. But for what? Everything in this house has original brass fittings. What about the grounds? Chloe suggested. Is there anything out there we haven't touched? I thought about the estate map, the gardens, the garage, the pool house. And then I remembered. Way back at the edge of the property, hidden behind a thicket of overgrown rhododendrons, was an old potting shed. It was practically falling down. Ryan had called it an eyesore and planned to bulldoze it. I hadn't gotten around to it yet because it seemed empty. The shed, I said. We grabbed flashlights. The sun was setting fast, and walked out into the cool evening air. The grass was wet with dew. We pushed through the bushes, the branches scratching at our clothes, until the small wooden structure loomed in front of us. It was covered in vines. The door was weathered gray wood, held shut by a heavy, rusted iron padlock. My heart started to race. This was it. I stepped forward, brushing the cobwebs away from the lock. I inserted the key. It was stiff. I had to use both hands to turn it. With a loud crack of breaking rust, the mechanism gave way. I pulled the padlock off and pushed the door open. It creaked, a low groan of protest after years of silence. We shined our flashlights inside. It wasn't a potting shed. "Oh my God," Chloe breathed. It was a studio. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dust motes dancing in the air, revealing a space that time had forgotten but love had preserved. This wasn't a place for gardening tools. It was an artist's sanctuary. Shelves lined the walls, filled not with rakes or shovels, but with canvases, sculpting clay, and wood-carving tools. In the center of the room stood an easel, covered by a drop cloth. "Grandma painted?" Chloe asked, stepping inside reverently. "I never knew. She didn't just paint," I said, moving toward a workbench in the corner. "Look at this." On the bench were intricate wood carvings. Birds, horses, small, delicate figurines that fit in the palm of your hand. They were beautiful, rougher than professional work, perhaps, but filled with emotion. And then I saw it. On the wall above the bench, pinned up with thumbtacks, were sketches. Hundreds of them. They were sketches of us. There was a sketch of Chloe as a little girl, chasing a butterfly. There was a sketch of George and Marie on their wedding day, looking young and hopeful. There was even a sketch of Ryan, aged about 12, sitting in a tree, looking out at the world with curiosity instead of greed. And in the center, drawn with charcoal, was a sketch of me. It was from the wedding. I was standing off to the side, fixing a broken latch on a gate while everyone else was eating cake. The caption underneath, written in her familiar script, read, "The one who mends." I felt a lump form in my throat so large I couldn't swallow. She had seen me. She had always seen me. Even when I thought I was invisible, she was capturing the moment. "She hid all this?" Chloe said, wiping dust from a canvas. "Why?" "Because the family expected her to be a matriarch," I realized, looking around. They expected her to be the woman who wrote checks and hosted dinners. They didn't have room for her to be an artist. This was her secret garden. I walked over to the covered easel in the center of the room. I hesitated, then pulled the cloth away. It was a painting. It wasn't finished, but it was vibrant. It depicted the estate, but not as it was, gray and imposing. In the painting, the house was warm, the windows were glowing with yellow light, and the garden was in full bloom. At the bottom of the painting, there was a small note taped to the easel. "Ezra, if you find this, it means you saved the house. Now please finish the painting." I stared at the canvas. The brushstrokes were bold, defiant. She had started a vision of what this family could be. Warm, welcoming, alive. And she had left it for me to complete. "She knew," I whispered. "She knew you were the one," Chloe said, resting her head on my shoulder. That Christmas, 6 months later, was different. There were no Ferraris in the driveway, no hired valet parking cars, no catered sushi chefs. We hosted it at the estate. The house was filled with the smell of pine and roasting turkey, a recipe I had found in one of Dorothy's old journals. We invited people who actually mattered. Mrs. Alvarez, the housekeeper, sat at the head table with us. We invited Timmy and his parents. We invited the neighbors who Ryan had alienated. And we invited Marie and George. They came. They were quiet, humble. They didn't bring expensive gifts. George brought a bottle of wine. Marie brought a homemade pie, something I hadn't seen her do in a decade. She looked lighter without the weight of pretending to be royalty. "Where is Ryan?" Timmy asked at the dinner table, his voice innocent. The table went quiet for a moment. "Ryan is working," I said gently. "He's figuring out his own path right now." "Oh," Timmy said. "Is he going to bring me a book again?" "No," I smiled. reaching under the table and pulling out a small, wrapped box. "But I have something for you." Timmy tore open the paper. Inside was one of the wooden figurines I had found in the shed. A small, perfectly carved eagle. I had sanded it down and polished it, bringing the wood back to life. "Grandma Dorothy made this," I told him. "A long time ago. She wanted you to have it." Eagles fly high, Timmy, but they always see everything on the ground. Timmy held the wooden bird like it was made of diamond. "Cool," he whispered. The evening was filled with laughter, real laughter, not the polite, forced chuckles of the past. We played board games. We drank hot cocoa. At midnight, after everyone had left, I walked out to the porch. The snow was falling softly, blanketing the estate in white. It looked just like the painting in the shed. I looked down at the driveway. It was empty. No noise. No showing off. Just peace. I thought about Ryan. I hoped, truly hoped, that wherever he was, stocking shelves or sitting in his empty apartment, he was finally learning the lesson that the rest of us had already grasped. That you can't buy respect. That you can't inherit character. And that the loudest person in the room is usually the most empty. I reached into my pocket and touched the old iron key. I had spent 7 years feeling like I was being erased. I thought my value was determined by the zeros in my bank account or the car in my driveway. But Dorothy had taught me the ultimate truth. We are not defined by what we accumulate. We are defined by what we restore. We are defined by how we treat the people who can do absolutely nothing for us. I looked up at the night sky. The stars were bright and cold. "Merry Christmas, Grandma D," I whispered into the dark. "And don't worry, I'm finishing the painting." I turned around and walked back inside, closing the heavy oak door against the cold, ready to live the life I had finally earned. Friends, the story of Ezra and Ryan isn't just a drama about inheritance. It's a mirror for our own lives. We live in a world that constantly tells us that our worth is measured by our external success, the brand of our car, the size of our house, or the price tag on our gifts. Ryan represented that hollow success. He had everything on the outside, but nothing on the inside. He thought relationships were transactions. He thought family was an asset class. And because of that, when the money vanished, he vanished. Ezra represented quiet value. He focused on restoration, on patience, and on genuine connection. He was treated like a ghost, but he was the only one who was truly real. The lesson here is simple but profound. Character is the only currency that doesn't devalue. Grandma Dorothy wasn't just watching Ezra. She was teaching us all. She showed us that the people who love you for your money will leave you when you're broke. But the people who love you for your soul will stand by you even when the world falls apart. Don't spend your life trying to impress people who only care about the show. Spend your life building a foundation that can weather the storm. Be an architect of memories, not just a collector of things. Now, I want to hear from you. What is the most valuable non-material gift you've ever received? Was it a letter? A piece of advice? A moment of time? Or, if you simply agree that character matters more than cash, drop the word "good" in the comments below. Let's flood the comments with positivity and remind the algorithm that real stories about real values still matter. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep building something that lasts.